kind and very nice ideology brought about me. It's always pleasure and I'm really delighted to stand here as a customer and that I see a lot of developments over a period of time. And this reminiscence about the difficulties that we went through at the inception of this Training Institute when we were conceptualizing of these sort of programs for the very senior officers. And I think that brought a lot of benefits to improve your knowledge. The Army's commander's concept is also to make the officer corps knowledgeable, that is to create a knowledge base, the officer corps, so that with this sort of pedestal or a platform are very well needed. When you look at these two sides, the vision and the mission, so that creates a thinking base for the officers. Director SIOPS, Commandant, senior officers, gentlemen, good afternoon. So it had been, we've heard a lot about the generations of warfare, the war fighting, and what is war, and how these wars have been developed over a period of time. It's not a very small subject, it's a very, very big subject that is known about as what causes of war, how and who, how the wars is being created over a period of time. I don't have very proper slideshow, but I have some very few slides which need some heading. Going the other way? Yes. So the modern world has been unmade several times by war. If you have read about the military history, the war has influenced the international relations of the world and particular nations. As the previous speakers brought about, that after the 30 years of war, that the mid 17th century until the signing of the Treaty of Westphalia, the concept of the nation state, no one has identified the sovereignty of a nation, but still the nation or the state to state war, interstate war has occurred during a period of time. So war, what it brings is the destruction. What is the ultimatum or the results of war is what that is looking for peace. You fight for a war is to bring peace. There's nothing else. You try hard, you put your all efforts, all your national powers as a state, head of a state, military instruments you use together, that's to bring peace against whatever conflicts that you face. So each of the great conflicts, that is the Napoleonic War, is a great strategist, the warrior, and then the World Wars 1 and 2, and afterwards that is the Cold Wars, where you saw the real conflict before the demise or the collapse or the disintegration of the Soviet Russia, and then now we are in this era. So what is this era is the most difficult era, where you call it is asymmetric or hybrid or unconventional, or you name it, subconventional, name it all, anything that comes from asymmetric warfare. It's very difficult to fathom out this asymmetric warfare which you and I have to understand, because we are living today in this the world. So Soviet-American conflict, that is during the 1947 to the end 89 or the early 90s. That is because of the perestroika and the glasnost of the Gorbachev, then president of USSR, that he came before with those concepts, collapse, disintegration of the Soviet Russia brought these two, the pillars or the camps. So they were resorted to proxy wars. So were there common elements among these origins or the causes? When I was doing the war course, one of my research was the causes of war. When I was trying my hard at fighting with all the literature as to find as a real exact reason for the comments or the occurrence of the 30-year war. I did find there are many, which I will come to you in detail in the next few minutes. And then I went again digging in, again with some books, material, literature, and to see as to what the real cause for World War I and then the interwar period. Although there were no war, but there were many small wars happened in Europe especially. Then we went for the World War II. So World War II, although that we thought that no results were brought about, then corruption of the nuclear armed race, as the DDGS brought about, or the General Algama brought about, the bombing or the nuclear bombing in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which caused collateral damage, brought a lot of destruction. So, war is the most powerful influence on international relations that we have to understand. War is the most powerful influence on international relations. So, international relations, in the sense that as a nation state or a state or a country, that you have to see as what is happening all around the world. When you are formulating your foreign policy and then against your national interests, national aims and other interests that you have as a nation, then you bring or funnel down to creating or formulating a defense policy, security policy, economic policy, etc., etc., etc. But the international relation is what that matters as a military officers that we were to understand. So warfare refers to the actual conduct of war in its military dimension. So war is not about fighting, not only fighting. Battles may occur. So the fighting is essential, but it can only be a tool, a means to a political end. So 21st century organized violence is different from wars of the 20th. And has been widely debated in both the scholarly and the political literature or the policy literature. So various terms have been used to conceptualize contemporary conflict, as I told you. Few words that I could spell out these were wars among people, wars of the third kind, also being used. If you browse through the internet, you see as what's this wars of the third kind, hybrid. Hybrid is very widely used today to define and to make ourselves understand what's ISIS is doing, what is their strategy, and then what Al-Qaeda is doing, what Taliban is doing, what Al-Shabaab is doing at that corner of the world, and how it's linked to Boko Haram, and what's their concept. We need to understand as what's coming this asymmetric war. So we have to understand that initially, and then about the context of strategic history. There's a strategy history. What affects for to wage a war? It's political, socio-cultural, then economic, technological, military strategic, geographical, historical. If we go by one, that is to make you understand. In the 17th century, parallels of Napoleon, that's the Karl von Clausewitz, who is the crucial theorist or the strategist, and who has gone a little beyond war to talk about how the war and the politics are interconnected, intertwined, if I go by that. But his concept or his theory is war is extension of politics. War is extension of the politics that you do. There's no war with no political agenda. It's the interests, intentions that you have in a nation state. So that's why the Karl Auschwitz says about the politics, the continuation of politics by other means. If the leader is filled with ambition and if he pursues his aims with audacity, that is desirous to reach his goals, achievement, interest, that we also have practiced, that we had a lot of bad experience over a period of time, central governments, because of our ambitious political decisions that made a person like Prabhakar. So that we have to understand, make ourselves. So that's about the politics. The political concept provides the lion's share, the major component, chief element of a war, which fell for the strategic stand in history. So decisions to fight or not are the products of the political process. So what we have to understand is not, the military never cannot wage a war in isolation. So then you have the socio-military context. Social factor, that is what that all we talk about the problems any nation encounters, socio-political economy. Those are the three factors. Whatever the factors you take into consideration falls into this socio-political economy. So the socio-military context is as how a fighter, what is his mindset, what is his social affiliations that he has to wage a war. Voice of the society, he says, okay, go for war. So that's the social affiliations that he has. So it's called socio-military. That's the combination or the affiliation that this has. So state that their societies approach strategic issues, as I told you, and behave militarily in ways shaped by their prevalent values and beliefs. So I hope that everyone, it's a book to read. I think most of you have read about the Clash of Civilizations written by this Samuel Huntington. It's very rightly, very clearly brought about as nations fight for their own interests, for the resources, for economic benefits. When a country is fighting with another country like India, Pakistan, yes, you can segregate. This is the line of control, international boundary. You go to that side and this side. But when it comes for the identity or the beliefs, or ideology, that's called the clash of civilization. You cannot never stop, make a full stop. To defeat a tank, you need what? Best weapon to defeat a tank is what? It's a tank. So defeat ideology, you need another ideology. So to find the ideology is not that easy. But you may be the supreme force in the world, but to find ideology. ISIS ideology, do you have another ideology? To kill the ideology of Taliban, though the Mujahideen were suppressed during the Soviet, but they had to pull back in late 80s. So that's a very, very important factor that you and I have to understand. Then comes the economic context. Economy is one of the very important aspects. You go looking for resources. So economy is one of the power potentials or the national powers in a state. So what are the national powers? Is politics, willpower, or the people, economy, geography. So those economy. So economy is one of the major important factor of a nation. It's called the power potential, one of the power potential or the national power. So that's most of the war fighting or the wars are revolved around these economic factors. So we have to understand. So war is waged with the products of technology. So technology we have discussed lot of details today. So you and I sitting or living in today's world is what anything happens in any corner of the world, so that comes on to your palm top within a fraction of a second today. So how the Arab Spring spread across in the Middle Eastern countries, and how the Western bias or the Western manipulated concepts of ideology ousted the Gaddafi and the Libya. So those, what the social network did not, it's only one part of the technology. So technology developed in before World War One. So that's the introduction of the gunpowder, then the other the shifting of the old weapons to the other hot weapons, or whatever you call as the commander of the army was talking about. So the war is waged with the products of technology. So without technology, only in the form of sticks and stones. I was reading last night small, very good article. So he says daggers and spears to tanks, aircraft, and combat ships. So today we are talking about the Bhakti-Shikan and all whatever that we have been using some missiles. So those are development of the technology. And then the next is geographical factor, or the geographical context is the destiny. Now there are big power players in the Indian Ocean who has come. The interest of the power is shifted from west to east now. It's going to be the Asia Pacific region, Asian century of Asia. The next Obama's second term policy that he brought about with the, what do you call this? Pivot to Asia policy. So you get three major players in now roaming around in the Indian Ocean. That's China, India, and the US also, that has a lot of interest. And so we got to live in that. So we are sitting in middle of that. So Asia is going to be the major power center in the future. So our military, our concepts, developments on military affairs, or our other policies, all revolves around this the environment. So that's the geography is the destiny. All strategic history has a geographical concept. So we even live in geography, and also we have that, that to grab all the trespass under the next door or the next the field. Like human has that tendency of crossing or grabbing land from others. So this is where the geography comes. So geographical context, which is to say the political meaning of spatial relationship, but could not help but provide a fairly stable context for the strategic history of the past 2 centuries. You see, if we go by the proxy wars that we had, starting from the Korean, then Iran, Iraq, then Vietnam. So those, it has some dimension on the geographical context also. It's not only that the ideological factor, communism and socialism, the democracy of that, the West and the East Asia that they had. So that's about those things. And then why we discuss about these generations of warfare, why we want to understand this as the subject per se is going to talk about today is the changing face of war. What do you understand by this change or the shift and the trends that you have in the today, tomorrow about the asymmetrics? What is this change? So the generation of warfare also says about the change, the shift, development of the civilization of ours. How from the catapult age or the Stone Age era to medieval period, and then we came to this technologically developed the maneuvers, Cold War, and then it was trench warfare where we had these man-to-man defenses, and we had this maneuverist plus the attrition, blitzkrieg, the deep infiltration deep into the enemy territory, and then gunning down the enemy's the heart or the real center of gravity. So then we step on to the 4th generation of warfare. So the 4th generation of warfare is very, very important to know, where we were also living. When we were growing, aging, when we joined the military forces, so we were talking about this. So fourth generation of warfare, it doesn't mean that the terrorism takes this major step further or the terrorism per se, but it has some dimensions, terrorism, technology and beyond. So it is not a new phenomenon. Even the historical perspective also that we understood about the terrorism, there, but not in a bigger way like today, what we are facing today in our affairs. So what do we see if we combine terrorism? Please note this word. If we combine terrorism with some of the new technology we know, for example, that effectiveness might the terrorists have if this car bomb is being made out of the developed technology. So what if we combine terrorism and the high technology, as our terrorists will be developed tomorrow. So the fourth generation of warfare is very, very dicey, dynamic, dangerous, ruthless, unpredictable. So that we have to understand. So generally, national security capabilities are designed to operate within a nation-state framework. In a nation-state, so that state's responsibility is to look after its national security. But outside that framework have great difficulties. But just imagine when it is being combined with this drug war, drug lords, transnational crimes, then the human smuggling, all are interconnected with this today's generation of the fourth generation of warfare. You may call it as a fifth generation, but it has another dimension there. So the nation state sees the drug lords but cannot control them. Why? That it is not within your purview. So we cannot attack them without violating the sovereignty of a friendly nation. So that's come from the Treaty of Westphalia. That's the sovereignty assured. Concept of the sovereignty is assured through that. So this fourth generation of warfare that we have to very well understand, or the terrorism or the asymmetry, this hybrid, all coming together and then dishing out to the today's platform or the earth. Now, in that, so West, if we talk about, always the technological development came from the West, basically. So West had the belief of its technology. So fourth generation engaged from non-Western culture traditions such as Islamic and Asiatic traditions. But now, in fact, that some non-Western areas like the areas, this part of the world, are not thoroughly developed the technology. So what they resort to, wage a war against the highly mobile, highly technologically developed militaries. So they went through this ideological development, that is jihadist, that conceptual ideologism is integrated into their fighting machines or the fighting concepts. So this is why the terrorism is very much a matter of maneuver. The terrorist firepower is small, and where and when he applies is very, very critical. So we have to understand. So the more successful terrorists appear to operate on broad mission orders that carry down to the level of the individual terrorist. So the battlefield is highly dispersed. It is in the symmetric war that you have front, rear, or the flanks are very well earmarked. Forward combat zone, middle or the rear, the flanks are it's exact, but not in asymmetry or in this scenario. So that's one thing. So terrorism is very much a matter of maneuver. The terrorist firepower is small, and where and when he applies is critical. So how to take example of the 9/11 attack? So that's by way of few aircraft utilized by the motivated 2-3 pilots. but how they strategize, that is what that is unpredictable. So they are highly qualified or the technologically developed the superpower that's being grabbed by these menace of terrorism. So that is today. If we combine the above general characteristics of fourth generation of warfare with the new technology, we see one possible outline of the new generation. So technologically, it is possible that a very few soldiers could have the same battlefield effect as a current today, or whatever the brigade battalion that we have. So growth of the robotic, unmanned aerial vehicles, like you said, low probability of intercept, communication, airfields, or airfield intelligence may offer a potential for radically altered tactics. So in turn, growing dependence on such technology will be inviting to new vulnerabilities. So that's a very good reason for the cyber attack or the aeroplane attack or whatever you want it, that 9/11 September. So that you invite, you critical, you vulnerable. So you got to have your own plans in your boardrooms or the battle rooms. So that we have to keep ourselves updated. So targets may be more in the civilians, as the previous one of the speakers was talking about, than the military sectors. Front rear terms will be replaced with targeted and non-targeted. The recent attack in Paris, so who knew? There's no front, no rear. How to figure out that who, the team of the fanatics or the insurgents came from where until they reached to the soccer ground and then to that the gallery. No one was aware. So that's the dimension that's today.